So this video has been in the backlog for quite a while. About a year ago, I completed this Foxy animatronic, and since then, the number one question I kept getting was, what about the files? What about a YouTube video? Now, I never really recorded a detailed process on how to make everything, and I never got the chance to do it all over again until now. So, today, almost a year later, we're doing the full breakdown. If you want to build this alongside me, I finally released the 3D models, code, and a bunch of other resources on my Patreon. So let's get started. Okay, I'm skipping the 100 plus hours of printing footage, but it basically went something like this. So we have our parts printed. I use PLA Plus because it works well enough and it prints well, and that was my entire thought process behind that. Now, since I know this design works, I'm going straight to finishing the parts. Most of it is covered in fur, so I'm just focused on the exposed parts. I sanded everything nice and smooth and spray painted all the parts. For the nose and eye patch, I used Flex Seal to give it a nice rubber-like texture. And for the eyes, I just printed the iris on a sheet of paper and glued it on with paper glue. So it should look something like this. We still have to weather everything later, so don't need to stress too much about this. So, now comes the most overwhelming part in my case. Like, when I started this project, I could do the design, I could do the mechanisms, I could do the software and programming. Now, what I couldn't do was applying the fabric. I was overwhelmed, and I was scared. So let's try to go over what I did, and let's hope it turns out the same as this. So we got red polar fleece for the head, and a cream color for the snout. Now, I didn't quite like how the colors turned out. As you can see, there's quite a bit of difference there, but this is the exact same fabric I use, so we'll get to that in a bit. In your case, just get the colors you like. Now, let's start with the most complicated part, which is the face. For this, you're going to need some plastic wrap, tape, some markers, and scissors. I wrapped half of it in plastic wrap, then use masking tape over it, making sure that I get it as smooth as possible, especially on the side bits. I then pretended that I knew what I was doing with those marks, but really, they're just guides. You just need to know where to cut and where the edges are. In my case, I just split the face from the cheek tufts and cut those in half so I can lay them flat on the surface. I then transferred the pattern to the fabric, and since the head is symmetric, I just flipped it over to get the full face. I did the same thing with the side bits like so. After that, I cut everything out, cutting closer on the edges that will be stitched, and leaving extra material on the rest. Now comes stitching. I originally used a sewing machine, but I no longer have that, so let's do it by hand. I looked up a technique called whip stitch, which is apparently super good at hiding seam lines, so let's do that. Now comes actually gluing the fabric onto the piece. For this, I use Gorilla Glue spray. This stuff applies evenly and stays stacky for a bit, meaning that if you mess it up, you can still lift the fabric and adjust it before it fully sets. Just apply it on the 3D print, then to the cloth, and slowly work your way around the piece, stretching it to make it nice and smooth. Again, don't worry if you mess it up, you can still lift the fabric and adjust it, or even add another coat of glue if it dries up. After that, it's just a matter of cutting out the excess fabric and tidying up the edges. I then repeated the same steps for the ears. Thankfully for the rest of the pieces, it's just a matter of cutting and gluing, so no sewing here. Okay, remember that I mentioned that I didn't quite like the colors of the fabric? Well, for this, I just slightly dusted some acrylic paint over all the parts. The difference is not super noticeable on camera, but this helped desaturate the reds a bit and make this snout a bit more red. Later during weathering, we'll work on making everything a bit darker. You're recording.
recording, we're recording. Seems good.
Now that we pretty much have all the parts ready, let's assemble what we can so we can slowly move on to the electronics.
¡Oh! Se rompió. Fuck.
Now, let's tackle the most complex mechanism on Foxy, which is the iMech. Since this assembly has a lot of small parts and screws, if I were to record a step-by-step on how to assemble everything, my hand would be on the way for most of the footage. So, I made this pretty nice animation to show how it's done. Alright, I hope you caught that. I'll include more details on this part along with the files just in case. Here's how it's looking so far with the microcontroller and connections. In your case, you can just follow this diagram I made showing where each servo and LED is plugged in. Okay, so those little blue pieces you see there, those are the I-links. To make those, I got some M3 rods, cut them down to size with a Dremel, and added some ball joints on each end. Once done, I just connected them to each of the servos. At this stage, we should test everything out and take the opportunity to calibrate the servos. So I just connected all the servo horns without fully fixing them yet. Let's hop on the computer to upload our first code. I connected the ESP to the PC and used an external power bank for the breakout board. This is a very important step, as servos take a ton of power and you don't want to fry your USB ports. I made a tool to make testing all of Foxy's functions much easier. To upload it, we hop on the Arduino IDE. Once the code has been uploaded, I can just open a local website to test that all the servos are moving as they should, with the correct limits and neutral positions. I can also test things like blinking, the eye movements, and even the LEDs. Once I make sure everything is calibrated and working properly, I screw all the servo horns in place. Continuing with the ears, I started by fixing a star servo horn to each ear. I then attached one of the beefier servos to this part. If you plug in the horn, you can get an idea on how the ear movement will work. There's still one extra step to do though. Since the ears are so long, they create a lot of stress on the motor. So here, I'm adding springs on the other end to create a counterbalance. This allows the servos to hold the ears without stressing too much. For the eyebrows, I just fixed some of the smaller servos to this piece. I then attach it to the back of the front magnets. We can loosely place the eyebrows for now. Now moving on with the jaw, I added a bearing to one of the sides for smooth movement. I then fixed the 35 kg servo in place. This one is extra strong as the jaw needs a lot of torque. I then secured the jaw in place on both sides. You can now get an idea on how it will all move. While this motor is strong, I still counterbalance the weight of the jaw using springs. After attaching the link to the motor, I fixed long springs from the jaw to the inside of the snout. I do this on both sides. As you can see, this makes the jaw spring back in place. We can now start mounting everything we have so far. I once again follow the diagram to know where each motor is plugged in to work with the code, connecting the ears, the eyebrows, and the jaw. Since the calibration code is already installed from our previous test, I just turn everything on for a quick second. This homes all the servos and confirms everything is connected correctly. I then disconnect the power and reattach all the servo horns to make sure all the parts are in their neutral position. The ears at 45 degrees, eyebrows neutral, and mouth closed. Now when plugging it back, Foxy should look neutral, something like this. I now go back to the calibration tool on my computer to make sure all the range of motions are correct. All the parts should move without colliding with anything. Here, I'm adjusting the ears because my initial numbers were a little off, but you shouldn't have this issue with the final code. I also checked the yaw here, making sure I lift it so that the motor doesn't collide. Everything is working correctly, so now I take the output from the calibration tool and paste it on the final code, and upload that code to the ESP. This is the code that allows me to control Foxy with a Bluetooth controller. So as you can see, Foxy is working as it should. But we're still not done yet. Foxy is not a pirate without his eye patch. So here's how we make it work. Listen close. Some fishing line, tie it to the eye patch so that it comes out the top hole. Place the eye patch, use a small piece of filament. Place it through so that it acts as the rotation axis. Then pass the fishing line through so you can catch it on the back. So the way that it will work is that by pulling on the fishing line, the eye patch will lift. Something like this. We want to do it with a motor though, so the idea is to tie it to the upper eyelid motor in a way so that when the eyelid is fully opened, the tension on the line is enough to lift the eye patch up. Not too loose, not too tight, just enough. This is kinda tricky to do now that things are assembled, so you may want to remove the ear to make it easier. I'm too lazy for that, so I spent like 10 minutes trying to tie the knot with everything around. As you can see, now opening the eyelid lifts the eye patch. Now let's close things up to get one last test with the controller. And voila! But the assembly continues. We're still not done. We want to make this wearable and not fall off our heads. So for this, I'm using a strap meant for tactical helmets. Foxy's head is massive, so this works very nicely as it holds from multiple points and can be adjusted for anyone. I just attached it to the 3D printed helmet using the screws it comes with. And here's me testing it. Heck yeah, it's all working. The 13 minutes you've seen so far was like a couple weeks for me, so I'm very glad this is all working. Ah, you thought we were done, huh? No, not yet. What about the little freckles on his snout? For this, I use foam clay. I formed some little balls of different sizes and flattened them out. I then painted them and glued them on. Foam clay is nice as it gives it a nice organic look and rubber feel to them. You could use other materials though. Okay, so at this point, everything's assembled and calibrated. So we're technically done? Look at him, he's so clean, so full of life. Now this guy has been through a lot. If you want the cute, clean, and colorful Foxy, you can stop right here. Because from this point on, we're ruining this guy's day. For most of the weathering, I'm using graphite powder, some black and brown acrylic paints, and an airbrush. I start by rubbing the graphite powder into all the fabric parts, focusing on areas where dirt and dust will naturally build up. It's best to start really light and slowly build your way up. I also add more graphite in spots where parts will rub against each other or get handled a lot. Here I'm using alcohol to clean up some areas where I feel like I went too heavy on. After that, I move on to airbrushing. Here I use watered down acrylics to hit areas where I couldn't reach with the graphite. And I also go over all the hard plastic parts to give them a more aged look. Here I'm dry brushing some metallic paint, making sure I go over every part. The goal with weathering is to tell a story, so if anything looks too clean, it immediately looks off. I slowly work everything, hand painting details and adding texture. There's so many ways to go about weathering, so feel free to explore what works best for you. Now that everything's done, let's do the reveal. And here he is, in all his glory. This video was a bit of an experiment. It was my first serious attempt at making long-form content. Heck, this was my first time even talking to a camera. So please, cut me some slack. If you enjoyed the format and want to see more builds like this, please let me know in the comments below. I have some crazy projects in the works, and I've been thinking about recording the whole making process for YouTube. I really want to start making my projects more accessible for you guys to recreate. So from now on, I plan to release my builds, like this one, to my Patreon supporters. To be real with you, designing and testing projects like this takes a lot of resources. And documenting everything pretty much doubles the time it all takes. Patreon support is what keeps the projects coming, and it allows me to focus more on creating and less on trying to survive. So a huge thank you to my patrons. If you want to recreate this project or check out my previous ones, like this bad boy, the link is in the description. This Foxy head is actually going to its new owner now. So Charlie, thank you for the commission, and I hope you like it. You know who you are. And finally, if you've watched up to this point, thank you, seriously. For 2026, my goal is to reach the 4,000 hours of watch time required by YouTube to monetize the channel. So you sticking around to the very end really counts. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.